Kitty, before we get started, is Brad not going to be here?
No, Brad won't be here.
Okay.
I'd like to call the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order at this time. Let's please stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we could have, since Lori gets here, we'll have roll call.
Chairman Severs.
Yes, present.
Vice Chairman Spidell. Present. Secretary Richardson.
Present.
Member Grant.
Present.
Member Rice.
Here.
Member Porter.
Here.
Alternate Member Riley. Here. Alternate Member Childs.
We certainly have a quorum at this time. Council, could you go ahead, and we have the pleasure of swearing in a new member to the commission.
Yes, I'd like to invite Mr. Danny Ayton up to the podium. Good evening, Mr. Ayton. Yes. I'd like to ask you to please repeat after me. Please raise your right hand, left on the Bible, and I'll just read a few words at a time. So,
okay.
I state your name.
I, Danny Ayton,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
protect, and defend
protect, and defend
the Constitution and government
the Constitution and government
of the United States
of the United States
and the state of Florida
and the state of Florida
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
domestic and foreign,
domestic and foreign,
and that I will bear
and that I will bear
true faith,
true faith,
loyalty, and allegiance
loyalty, and allegiance
to the same,
to the same,
and that I am entitled
and that I am entitled
to hold office
to hold office
under the Constitution,
under the Constitution,
that I will faithfully perform
that I will faithfully perform
all of the duties
all of the duties
of the Planning and Zoning Commission
of the Planning and Zoning Commission
of the City of Titusville,
of the City of Titusville,
on which I am about to enter.
on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations and welcome to congratulations on becoming the latest member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. You may
Thank
now
you.
take your seat and vote as a regular member.
Mr. Ayton, on behalf of the commission, we certainly welcome you here and glad to have you aboard. Is there any words you would like to say at this time?
Yeah.
Feel free to do so.
Just happy to be here, happy to be able to serve.
Thank you. We appreciate that. At this time, if council could read the notice in connection with the conduct of the meeting. Thank you, council.
In order to help prevent the spread of the COVID-19 coronavirus and to comply with all local, state, and federal laws and guidelines regarding social distancing rules, designated seating shall be provided for the public at Planning and Zoning Commission and other city boards meetings. Individual speakers shall, when directed to do so, be given the opportunity to speak on agenda items during the meetings in accordance with City of Titusville policies and Resolution Number 36-2020. No tripods, easels, props, or other demonstrative aids shall be brought into public meetings of Planning and Zoning Commission and city boards. Speakers are permitted to have a sign with them during their designated speaking time, provided that the sign is held by the speaker and is to be removed at the conclusion of their speaking time. Speakers who appear in person will be subject to screening for symptoms of COVID-19, and any persons exhibiting any symptoms of COVID-19 will not be permitted to enter City Hall or public meetings of Planning and Zoning Commission and city boards. As an additional method for public participation, the public may submit written comments via email to planning@titusville.com or by regular mail to Planning and Zoning Commission's attention at City Hall, 555 South Washington Avenue, Titusville, Florida, 32796. Written comments must be received by 12 noon prior to the start of the meeting and include the sender's name, address, and subject line must specify the agenda item being addressed. All comments will be disseminated to the Planning and Zoning Commission members and made a part of the public record prior to any action being taken. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you. At this time, let's move to approval of the minutes. We have the special and regular meeting of May the 19th. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Member Porter.
On page 13, I voted yes, and it shows me voting no. 13 of page of 54.
Okay. Any other additions or corrections? Do we have a motion to approve with that one correction? Member Spidell.
Motion to approve the minutes of May 19th special regular meeting
With the correction.
with correction.
Okay. Do we have a second? Member Richardson.
I second the motion.
All right. Assuming, does anyone else want to be recognized at this time? All those in favor, please say yes.
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 Opposed, no. Okay, they passed. And that took care of both minutes, as I understood it, the special and the regular meeting. We do not have any quasi-judicial procedural items as such, so we will not read that part. Consent agenda, none. Old business, number A, strategic planning activity. I'd like to move that to after new business because we do have some members of the public here that would like to be heard under the public hearing. As I see it, we probably have someone that wants to be heard on both items. Ms. Ward, do you want to be heard on the brewery ordinance? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we get to that, it says here that a separate vote is required for each set of minutes.
Okay. I just assumed the motion included both together, but let's have another motion. I assume that first one was on the special meeting minutes.
No, first one is
Excuse me, it was on the regular meeting because as such. So do we have a motion to approve the special meeting minutes?
So moved.
We have a second.
I second.
Member Riley, did you have something additional?
You didn't specify whether or not I voted tonight?
No, because we have a full commission.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Again, all those in favor of approval of the special meeting minutes, please say yes.
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 Those opposed, no. Those are approved. Again, no quasi-judicial item. We do have old business, and as I indicated, I think we ought to take that up after the public hearing since we have members of the public here to be heard on items A and B. We call now upon staff for their presentation on item A, the brewery ordinance.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief summary. So on January 20th, 2021, the P&Z reviewed a proposed ordinance related to brew pubs. At that meeting, the commission expressed concerns with the proposed draft and requested a simplified version of the ordinance. During that meeting, during the April 21st meeting, Secretary Richardson asked to see a simplified version that's easier to understand, and Member Rice made a motion to approve the draft brewery ordinance. The motion passed with 6 yeses and 1 no. With that, the ordinance that is proposed tonight is similar to what you've seen before. And I'm here if there's any questions about the ordinance.
Does any member of the commission have any questions at this time? Otherwise, I'll open up the public hearing. Mayor Buller-Spidell.
No, sorry.
Not seeing any lights. Do we have any cards on this item?
Laura Ward.
I don't think it's necessary because we only have one person, I believe, on this item, so we won't set the timer. It's
on now? Okay, well, thank you for moving it up. I appreciate that. I was really going to come and listen to it all and then try to talk. But let me just say why I'm concerned about it. I want to make sure that the ordinance addresses neighbors and residential properties that abut this type of an operation. I think they're very similar to a restaurant, if not the same, but I know that they wouldn't have been put in an industrialized zone previously if there hadn't been some concerns about what goes on there. And I was wondering if you could answer some of those questions for me, like what is it about these particular operations that would have made it appropriate for an industrial area before, and now we're changing and allowing it in the a lot of other zonings that have residential properties. Our neighborhood has SMU in the neighborhood, and this type of an operation could be in SMU, is my understanding. Is that right?
That's correct. That's drafted.
And I spoke to Eddie late today, just quickly, and I know this isn't the time to talk about the noise, because you're going to address noise as a whole thing later. Is that correct?
That was the direction to handle that separately.
Okay. Well, I'd like to use just a few minutes of my time to ask if there's a way that the staff can notify people that want to be notified when the staff package is published and is available on the internet. I would like to know when the noise ordinance comes up. When you're talking about that, I'd like to be notified. And I don't know how they do that because, we can't get staff package anymore prior to the meetings without calling in and asking for it. And if you don't know what's coming up, you don't know to call in. So that's a request that I'd like to make on the record. And then I just hope that you all will, if there's anything in this ordinance that you think you would not like to live next to that would be going on there, I would really appreciate it if you would talk about it and make sure that you're covering. I know you try to make it easy for businesses to operate, and we want that. We have a restaurant in our neighborhood. We get along great with it. It does not have amplified outdoor music. That's why we get along great. So I know this isn't the time to talk about that. So I'll just ask that if there's other activities like the brewing thing, are they going to be allowed to do brewing operations that would be disruptive or disturbing to you if you live next door to it? Because a lot of these things are like really close up against residences. So that's what I came down to see if you all were going to discuss that at all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I can clarify?
Yes, go ahead.
At this point, City Council has given staff direction to move forward with the Brewery Ordinance. If it is the Commission's desire, or if there's still concerns about other issues that are ancillary to the brew pub discussion, I would recommend that the Commission issue a recommendation to City Council so that staff can ask for advisability from Council to address those items.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, do we have any other cards on this item?
No, sir.
Okay, it comes back to the commission. Any questions, comments, observation by commission members? Member Richardson.
Yeah, I just want to clarify the comments that Eddie made concerning simplification of the ordinance. Different ordinances, including Orlando and West Melbourne, were far less complex. And my main objection was this use table. Talks about too many activities don't have anything to do with brew pubs.
Chairman, could I address that?
Certainly, go ahead.
So the use table is in the current land development code, and whenever we update a table on our Muni code, the entire table has to be updated or shown. Otherwise, Muni code may delete some of the table or all of the table except for what's being added. So unfortunately, we've made it easier for the user when we're trying to review the land development code, but when we're adopting new code, we have to include those sheets.
I hear you. I don't buy it, quite frankly.
I think an easier way to look at those pages is just look at page 28.
Right.
It highlights the districts that are impacted. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Member Rice, you were next.
Yeah, for staff, when this came up last time, we sort of did look at noise and outdoor seating were the other two items that were sort of tag teamed with this. So with what you said, does that mean City Council has not authorized staff to look at outdoor seating and noise? Is that a true statement?
Correct.
Okay. So tonight, we're just looking at the brewery, and that entire operation would have to abide by with existing code. And refresh my memory, outdoor seating is conditional use? Is that a true statement in all these zoning categories, or no? Okay. How about let's look at SMU and let's concentrate on that one. I know what the noise ordinance says, and it applies throughout the city. That outdoor seating.
So Code Section 28-361 controls outdoor areas of seating, and there are maybe 15 to 20 zoning categories that allow it with limitations.
Is SMU one of them?
And SMU has an L, and under the limitations, there are specifics provided for some of the zoning categories. Is a very long list in the DMU, A through O is the conditions required in the DMU. To refresh the Commission's memory on how this ordinance has evolved, the initial presentation of the brewpub ordinance was obviously different than the one you're seeing tonight, and conversations and questions were asked regarding the hours of operation, the outdoor entertainment, and outdoor seating, which are two separate things. And ultimately, that ordinance didn't go forward and has been re-advertised tonight as presented based on the recommendations and conversations that were had. In the meantime, staff also worked on the outdoor seating ordinance that was a draft not published as an advertised ordinance and not directed by council, but it was a conversation that was created by the Planning and Zoning Commission where staff followed the request of making that draft ordinance, where we saw many members of the community come out and state their objections to some of the things that were included in it. That ordinance has not been directed by council. I think that's the point that we're trying to make.
Okay. And so if this were to pass tonight, any operation that was allowed in the zoning category under this use would have to be indoor unless they met the outdoor seating, and they would still have to meet the noise ordinance? Is that correct? Okay.
So outdoor seating would control, and those subsections that talk about the different zoning districts. For example, I talked to you about A through O for DMU. In
Right.
UMU and NC, the only condition is that outdoor areas of seating may only operate during the hours of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then IRCN has its own specifications, but those are the only sub-districts that have requirements for outdoor seating. So SMU is not included in the outdoor areas of seating. So if that was a section that the city council wanted to amend specifically to SMU, I think the way to do it would be under 28-361, under outdoor areas of seating, that section that
Okay.
exists.
All right. Thank you.
Before I go to Member Grant, I want to make sure I understand. Outdoor seating is not permitted in SMU. Is that correct?
There is an L in the table that says districts where permitted in SMU.
Okay.
So with limitations, it doesn't have any specific limitations provided for SMU zoning district.
So it can be permitted anywhere. There's no setback requirements, nothing.
The only setback requirements are in IRCN within 50 feet of a residential property line, or in the
In which
DMU.
district? In which district?
IRCN, C, and the DMU also has its own setback restrictions.
Okay. I'm specifically talking about SMU.
Those do not exist. Conditions for outdoor seating within SMU do not exist.
So there's no limitation listed.
Correct.
Therefore, since there's no limitation listed, it's permitted,
Yes.
correct?
And that's
I
my
just want to make
interpretation
sure we all
as-
understand what we're saying here. Okay. Member Grant.
When we discussed hours of operation, did that include the brewing operation also? You know, when they're actually brewing, or did it include other things like the restaurant and music and all that good stuff? The reason why I'm asking here, will they be allowed to brew 24 hours a day?
I hadn't given that much thought. I don't know if the planner has a better answer for that.
Is that respective to the current ordinance in the agenda packet tonight?
Well, yes, and it's a question I have. Will they be allowed, what I'm getting at, well, could you answer that part for me, please? Do you know whether they'll be allowed to?
Do you mean like, are the machines running with no people there? Is that in operation? I don't, because I think it takes a long time for the beer to brew. So I think that's a fine line there. I don't know exactly if I think the hours of operation would probably be that it would be when it's open to the public. I think that's how most hours of operations are interpreted.
So
there
the
could
brewing
be-
process would be automated and no one would have to be around and all. Okay, next question. Could you define, I'm sorry? Go ahead. Could you define limited use?
So a limited use in our use table, we have different keys. P is permitted, which is a use that you could come in and get your.
I understand.
So an L is similar to permitted. It's permitted. You can get your permit without a public hearing process. However, there are certain criteria, limitations that have to be met in order to get that permitted status.
The reason why I ask because I have my only discomfort with this. I mean, I don't have a problem with the brew pubs. I don't have a problem with it. My only objection was having them in the district called Urban Village, which can include residential. I do not like the idea of them being in a residential area, like the lady in the audience here. And on the Urban Village is listed as limited, if I'm reading that correctly. Right? So I just want to know, what was your definition of limited? What could they do? What can they do in a limited district?
So if you notice, all of the districts that the brewery is being added to, they're all L, limited. And the limitations are under subsection C on page 28 of 54. And it's basically having to do with how much volume can be produced at the site.
They are permitted in some areas, am I correct?
Oh, currently, yes. What's being added is underlined, and so that's,
I understand all that.
okay.
But those other districts are non-residential, except Urban Village. Urban Village can be residential, the way I understand it.
Yes, sir.
And that has been my pet peeve from the beginning. But, well,
If you could convince the commission that UV is not appropriate for brew pubs, this ordinance could pass with UV being deleted from the ordinance as presented.
I just want a definition of the limited. I mean, if
The limitations are on page 28 under C. And that would apply to all of the
That's it?
categories.
Yes.
no other conditions?
If you'd like to propose additional conditions, you could approve the ordinance with additional conditions, or limitations, excuse me.
I'm using the word conditions and limitations interchangeably as it's presented on standards for permitted uses with limitations and it says and conditional uses because there's a C under UMU, which means that it's a conditional use in UMU to have a brewery.
Well, my condition from day one was not allowed and not permitted in residential areas. I'm not going to ask for a motion on that, but I was just voicing my opinion on it. Yeah.
So I think there's two ways to address what you're proposing. You could either remove UV as Chelsea mentioned, or you could add a limitation that's specific to the UV and create some kind of distance requirement from residential.
Well, now you confuse me, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
So language that Eddie suggested would be something like standards for permitted uses with limitations would say, in the urban village district, no breweries shall be allowed within, or all breweries shall have at least a 50-foot setback from any residential property use, or something like that. Could be a limitation that would be crafted specific to the concern that you have with UV. So that's a potential recommendation that you as a commission member could make as far as making a limitation in UV, which is a possibility you could discuss with your fellow members.
Thank you. Just may do that.
A couple of comments. I don't see any other lights at this stage. Your attachment for Lakeland reflects the only place that microbreweries are allowed as a permitted use is within industrial. Every other district, and it's fairly limited under their ordinance, are conditional uses. The other one from Dunedin, it's a little hard for me to tell, but there are at least one conditional. I don't know what these symbols stand for. What I do know, based upon what has been said here, is you have limited for tourist, limited for CC, limited for all the DMU, limited for SMU, and RMU 400 limited, and UV limited. When I look at the limitations, in reality, there are really no limitations other than the maximum production. Therefore, as a matter of what I understood legal counsel to say, if there isn't a limitation, it's permitted. And that addresses Mrs. Ward's concern. In SMU, there are no limitations other than the volume. So it's permitted, and it's permitted without any restrictions. I brought up initially the concern in SMU that in accordance with our existing ordinance, drinking establishments are not allowed in SMU. There's a lot of them grandfathered in. And why in the world are we allowing a manufacturing facility of a microbrewery in an SMU when a bar is not even allowed? I don't understand the logic, and I would appreciate an explanation of the logic behind that, because on the face there's an inconsistency in the code, and I brought this up when we first talked about it.
And since then, we also saw that a restaurant is permitted in shoreline mixed use.
Yes.
And so it's an inconsistency in the code as far as where a restaurant may have be partially a drinking establishment, but a standalone drinking establishment would not be permitted.
Well, so many of these brew pubs primarily are like bars. They specialize in brewing beer and having different varieties, just like a bar would have a variety as such. So again, I don't understand the examples you have provided to me, and without limitations that are real limitations, number one, I don't have a problem with brew pubs at all. I think we should encourage that. But as presently drafted, the only thing I would respectfully suggest that certainly the urban village, I think, ought to be a conditional use, because there are standards in the code dealing with conditional uses. I think if you're going to insist upon it being an SMU, I think it ought to be a conditional use, just like as a UMU. And whether or not there's any others that ought to be conditional uses, I don't know. But at a minimum, I think those categories should be as conditional uses rather than limited when there's no limitation. And I can just think of countless, in addition to Mrs. Ward's example, of other SMU property on the river where you have a residence right next door to another piece of property that's SMU. And without limitation, I think that's wrong. I just think that's wrong and inconsistent on its face with the code as such. In addition, I think it's really inconsistent with what Lakeland is saying, that this is more of a manufacturing use and you're permitting it there. And if you're going to allow it someplace else, allow it as a conditional use. That's what the materials show to me. Anyone else have any additions, comments, or staff? Do you want to comment upon what I answered? Member Grant.
What would those conditions be?
I haven't taken the time to draft those, but I think they have to be some setback. Like we originally said, the West Melbourne example was 125 feet from a residential structure. The West Melbourne example was that for brew pubs. I would think we would start off with something like that.
Sir,
Yes.
the conditional use process requires a public hearing, which is that added layer of democracy that's included in the approval process. So if you are inclined to modify the ordinance to change that L to a C for those two zoning categories, which include or abut residential, then that public hearing process would allow you all an opportunity, a public hearing with that applicant to list those conditions specific to that site. So you would have a site-specific application where you could determine the appropriate setbacks based on what's surrounding the property. It doesn't need to be predetermined by the ordinance to have those conditions. But there are examples that are included in, for example, the outdoor seating code section that you could use as applicable criteria for the conditions that may come before you in the future. Hypothetically, it's talking about that CUP process.
I agree with what you're saying. Member Rice, you're next.
At the beginning, you defined the two licenses by the state, and the only difference is one is capped at 5,000 barrels and one is unlimited production. The smaller one can only consume on site and not sell. Is that a correct statement? Is the way I read it. That's on page
18 of 54.
16 is where I'm reading, where it says permit distribution of beer, whatever, and production is for on-site consumption only, and that's the CMBP license that the state issues, versus the CMB, which has unlimited production. Okay, so to me, where I'm here tonight, there's a couple of different ways we can solve some of these problems. One is maybe there should be a CMB category and a CMBP category. And, you know, the smaller production should be maybe allowed in some of these zoning categories, okay? Where the large production license should not maybe be in some of these categories, okay? I think that would help alleviate some of that. Out of the zoning categories that you have on page 28, okay, besides DMU, what zoning categories here, I think I know, but I just want to confirm, which ones allow residential use within that zoning category? I know it's SMU. I believe it's what's UV and UMU? Is it only those three?
Correct. I'm unsure about RMU 400. I can take a look at that.
And while you're looking at it, I'm going to ask another question is, do you know what downtown Playlander Brewery, what their production is?
I don't.
If they have a CMBP license or a CMB license, do you know that?
I don't.
Okay.
Member Anton, I think you have a question, sir?
Well, I might have an answer to Woody's question. I do recall that at the beginning when the downtown hardware store opened prior to Bricks, that they could not serve food along with it, and I believe they only served their own products. At some point, probably about the same time they opened Bricks, it changed to where they actually serve hot food now. They put a kitchen in, and they not only serve their products, but they serve other typically microbrewery products, but they serve wine that they don't make and some other things as well. So, I mean, I kind of agree that it kind of blurs the line between what's a bar or what's a bar in a restaurant and what's a microbrewery, because the microbrewery piece adds a production element, manufacturing, whatever you want to call it, to what we would kind of all walk into and say, you know, this is smells like a bar. I can, you know, order drinks. I can sit there and have drinks. I can have snacks, and in some cases, I can have a full meal. So it's more like a restaurant. So I think it's a little sticky that, you know, does somebody come in who really wants to open a bar, but for some reason we've got a hole in the ordinance that doesn't permit it, but they can add a tank and say they're a microbrewery, and now all of a sudden it is. So I realize there's some inconsistencies here. It seemed like something that we should definitely focus on fixing, so there aren't these holes in there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
to answer your question, Member Rice, about RMU 400, it does allow residential uses.
It does. RMU 400 does. And then the issue I'm struggling with within SMU is such a long grouping that there's probably pockets where there are no residential, okay, and then there's pockets where there is residential. So to me, the logical thing possibly to motion would be that any establishment in the SMU that's within 100 feet of a residential use is an automatic conditional use permit. Okay? But if they're further away from that, they're not. I mean, that could solve some of the issues with putting things too close to residential. Okay? And not saying make everything in SMU conditional use, but if you're in the SMU and you're within 100 feet, or any of the residential uses, quite frankly, within 100 feet of a residential use, it's a conditional use. And then city council can put the conditions and go through the hearing process.
Okay. Any other members have a comment, suggestion, and/or motion? Member Anton?
So I'm assuming what was just mentioned, that condition or that distance, 100 feet sounds right, of a residential. All of the residentials are Ls, so we could add another L or another limitation or condition that is, if it's within 100 feet of a residential property, then it requires a conditional use permit?
Correct. I think the cleaner way might be to have it say conditional use, because that's the more restrictive, and then say if it's not within 100 feet, it can be approved.
So the opposite of,
Right.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, do we have any other comments, questions, or motions?
I do have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Noise and air entertainment is going to be handled totally separate with another ordinance. Is that correct?
So at this time, the advisability is only for the brew pubs, breweries.
Correct.
If the commission wants to, thinks that there's a need to address those in a future ordinance, we would need a recommendation from P&Z to council so that staff can ask for advisability for that next ordinance.
And that has not been done.
Correct.
So I think he's suggesting that if we believe that should occur, we should make a separate motion addressing that issue. Member Grant.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the ordinance with the changes as stated by Mr. Rice, who did it so eloquently. If you would like to repeat those to help me out, I appreciate it.
Well, I'm going to try to phrase it the way Eddie was saying, the staff was recommending.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
And that is that, oh, sorry. Okay. That we would change, our recommendation is that we would change all zoning categories that have a residential, a possibility of a residential use in it, that they become conditional use, and the condition is if they're within 100 feet of a residential use. Otherwise, they're automatically a limited use. I think that's what you said, Eddie.
Member, do we have a second to the
Second.
motion? We have a second by Mr. Richardson. Any further discussion on the motion? Roll call.
Member Grant,
Yes.
Secretary Richardson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Spidell. Yes. Member Rice,
Yes.
Member Porter,
Yes.
Member Akon,
Yes.
Chairman Severs.
Yes. That passes. Moving on to the
If I
next-
may, I wanted to answer one of Woody's questions since I was doing some research while you all were talking about the production. I looked back at February 2019, right before the pandemic, and Titusville's Playa Linda came in number 46 in the state as far as the Florida Brewery's monthly tax paid sales. And they do it by the month. The number of sales in barrels was 55. So annual, you would multiply that by 12 to get a rough average of what that production. And I do know from personal knowledge that their biggest customer is Disney. So
Okay, next item, temporary office ordinance. Staff.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. On May 11th, 2021, at the request of a citizen, the City Council approved advisability to develop an ordinance to permit temporary offices in industrial zoning. The draft ordinance addresses the following issues related to temporary offices: minimum lot size, maximum number of units at one time per property, maximum time duration of placement, location standards, and permitting requirements. During their discussion on May 25th, City Council discussed those items and the approval of time extensions by either the City Council or the Administrator. I did want to point out that the ordinance in your agenda packet has been updated since it was sent out to you all, and there's a new version or an updated version with 3 or 4 minor changes, and that's available in your Agenda Star packet. We highlighted the changes so that you can see exactly what's being changed, and I'll walk you through those. If you'll open up the Agenda Star version of the temporary offices. So starting on, if you're in the individual file and not in your agenda packet, it's page 4 of 6. I'll wait a second to make sure everyone's at the right spot. Still hearing lots of clicks. Can I help anybody out? Sure. Okay, looks like we might all be ready now. Sorry about that. So the first change is on subsection C1A. It's highlighted where it shows that the minimum lot size required for placement of temporary offices is 1 acre, and the building coverage maximum shall not exceed 70% of the total lot area. In subsection B, we have a decision to be made by the commission tonight. Either the administrator or city council needs to be chosen for this section. And what this section says is the deciding body may extend the time limit for an additional 2-month period when the temporary structure is found in compliance with this section, as evidenced by review of any outstanding code enforcement actions, and an extension is submitted because the office is required for continuity of operations. Subsection C1C, we added the word at a minimum because in some cases it may be necessary to have a Class 2 permit if the improvements are substantial enough. And so we didn't want to limit it to just a Class 1 site permit. On page 5 of 6, subsection H, temporary office units shall not be located on required parking spaces, stormwater facility, or impede driveway access points, ADA parking bays, or accessible paths. Structure shall be placed in a manner that maintains ingress and egress paths. And finally, subsection J, the provisions of this code does not waive the requirements of the Florida Building Code, ADA requirements, ADA regulations, Florida Fire Prevention Code, and NFPA standards. The provisions of the city's land development regulations are not waived except as contained in this code section. And those are the update summary of the updated version.
Okay. Any questions of staff at this stage?
I do.
Member Richardson.
Yes, as I recall from the last council meeting when it was first reading, it was 5 acres. And then Councilman Jordan brought up that his property was 1 acre. It was, council changed it to 1 acre. Is that right?
Correct.
And you've given us a choice between the administrator and the city council may extend the time, right?
That was because there was a split in council, and they had conversations about one or the other.
Okay.
But to clarify, technically, any of this could be changed per your recommendation.
Yeah.
So if you think that there should be one or the other selected by this commission's motion, either to choose that you recommend the administrator or city council to be the determining body, you could make that part of your motion tonight. That would help council.
Okay.
Member Spardell.
I have a question that's similar to the time frame. As I remember from council and the comments and from the speaker, that these launches are back to back and they need this facility. Is 2 months, as indicated in B under C, is that adequate?
We have the applicant here if you wanted to ask that question directly to the applicant.
It is 6 plus 2 months.
I don't see the 6.
No, it's originally 6 months with
Okay.
the extension of 2.
Okay, per year, okay. May I ask him?
All right, let's
Is-
hold off to the public hearing.
Okay. Never mind.
Member Grant, you'll be next.
Was there any other districts considered for this, for instance, like commercial or civic, public and stuff like that? Because it seems to me that either one of those may require some temporary offices at some time.
No, at this point, I mean, there have been several districts, but they've all been industrial districts. And so if you turn to page 42 of 54 in your agenda packet, that starts a series of maps. The first map is all properties that are 5 acres or greater that are zoned M1, M2, M3, either completely or partially. And so you can see if you chose to limit it to these properties, just how many properties throughout the city, where they are spatially located, and just how many properties would be impacted. The next map on page 43 of 54 is all planned industrial development zone properties. The following map is properties 5 acres or greater that are zoned PID and industrial, M1, M2, M3. And then finally, properties on page 45 of 54, properties 5 acres or greater completely or partially within just the PID zoning. So that gives you some options between the 4 maps if you wanted to decide just how many properties or where you think this is appropriate in the city. But as far as commercially or residential districts, no, those weren't considered.
Well, that was my question, whether they were or not. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Aton.
You may have clarified this already, but I was curious, is the two-month extension a single 2-month extension, or could you get a 2-month extension and then go back with the administrator approval, a continuation of another?
I interpret it to be the 6 plus an additional 2 months, and that would be it.
That's it. So a single 2-month extension and it maxes out.
Okay, any other questions of staff at this stage? Otherwise, we're open the public hearing. Let's call the cards.
Mark Mumbling.
Hey, thanks for letting me speak. My name is Mark Mumblow. I'm the facility manager at Astrotech Space Operations, and it was my colleague, David Mandernack, that made the original request to council for this. I'm just going to go over some of the background of how we got to this point, if you guys have any questions about that. But basically, later this year, we have, I don't know how many people know about Astrotech, but we're a spacecraft processing facility. Tenants come into our site and do their final processing of their spacecraft and bring their people to do all the work. And so they bring their staff in, and we provide them office space and a high bay for processing of the spacecraft. And later this year, we have 2 NASA missions that will be processing simultaneous. And with NASA, as with any NASA program, they have a large number of staff they bring in to support that mission, more than military or any of our commercial customers. So because those 2 NASA missions are arriving at the same time, we do need additional office space to support all of their supporting personnel. The first one arrives, the one this office is for, it's a program called Lucy. They arrive in mid to late July. And then the second one is a GOES satellite that arrives about a month later. So the solution we came up with was bringing in these Will Scott modular offices. And they can size them to however many people we need to support. And originally they had proposed it was because of our limited space, we were going with a 2-story option. We had our pre-application meeting with staff and the building department, and they said, no, you have to comply with all the ADA rules as stated here in the proposed regulation or ordinance. And so we did go back and we split it into 2 single-story office buildings, temporary modular offices. We've also added, after discussions with the building department, we've added a bathroom to each of these offices to meet code. Also talked with the fire department to make sure that they're placed in the correct position. There's 15-foot minimum between adjacent buildings. So we've been working with the fire department and the building department to address their requirements. And so when we originally had our pre-application meeting with staff, they informed us, sorry, there's nothing in the code that allows them to address temporary offices in our particular zone. So that's what started this whole process. We appreciate the work staff's done to quickly expedite this ordinance. So I know it's been very, very rushed from what we've heard of previous ordinance changes. So I mean, that's why we're here, and I appreciate you guys considering it.
Do you have any problems meeting any of the standards in the ordinance?
No, we're good with the language of the ordinance.
Okay. Member Richardson.
One question. Does the length of time affect you with your customers? In other words, 8 months?
That's more than sufficient. This particular customer, Lucy, is a planetary probe, so it's got to launch when it's got to launch, so there won't be a slow delay. It's either makes that delay, I'm sure it's a 2-year delay. So
okay, thank you.
It's plenty of time.
Any other? Member Rice.
How many times in a year does this situation occur?
The last time this happened was 2009.
Okay, so it's not very frequent.
It's not. No, it's very rare.
So the cost of moving modulars in and moving them out is just an expense, knowing that in 8 months they're gone.
Right, and actually the customer is paying for this.
Okay,
so it's an
so
optional
it's a pass
service
on to the customer.
Right.
Okay.
Member Porter.
And how many folks are you expecting for these modules, to occupy the modules?
One of them is configured with 12 walled office spaces. That's for their management team. And then the other one's a bullpen, which is set up 18 desks inside of it.
So this has nothing to do with the payloads and the equipment that they're bringing in?
Right, this is just the personnel they're supporting the payload.
Member Spidell.
This question might be to staff or to both of you, but since they're adding bathrooms to each of these now, is the infrastructure adequate on the site for that?
That'll be evaluated during the site plan process.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Spidell, you had an earlier question you wanted to ask.
I think he.
Other members had asked the question and you had answered in the affirmative that
Yeah, 8 months is.
plus 2 was adequate.
Yes.
My original question is because it appeared, maybe I was hearing it incorrectly at the council meeting, that this was just an awful lot of people at one time. And so there was a definite demand for this. And that as we expand programs attached to both SpaceX and NASA, that was going to be more of a, we need this all the time. Did I misinterpret that meeting?
I mean, that's our hope, is that yes, we will have the capability to support multiple payloads at the same time.
So is then 8 months?
As far as anything that we can see on the horizon, 8 months is going to be
Is adequate?
sufficient, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Member Baton.
Mine's kind of along the same vein that, because of the, process of changing the ordinance and the fact that it does end at 8 months, not knowing, because of the way we're reading it, if it's a calendar year, is there a chance you could get into a situation where there's a job or 2 contracts that you don't anticipate right now that come up, that we get into this kind of gray area where we got to go back through this process again just because of the limit that you can't do an extended 2 months with approval or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we know it won't be the case with this one because, like I said, it's a planetary that's got a set launch date. But there could, with launches, anytime there's a delay in a launch vehicle, it could, I guess, potentially
Yeah, I'm just thinking
slip.
while we're here, it's maybe not a big deal to still have the appropriate controls in place, but provide that in the future, if it does happen, we can accommodate it.
Then can an addition be added to this rather than returning? These gentlemen return for each need?
Well, I think that's what you're seeing with the additional 2 months, but if you wanted to increase that 2-month period to a longer period or add an additional extension, you could do that as well.
Can there be an unlimited extension? I mean,
No, I think what
I think
Eddie's
it's
saying
some-
is it could say like up to 2-month additional or something like that.
I think someone else wants to add.
Why don't you come on up?
There's another member of the public who'd like to speak. Yes.
David Mandernack.
Did you put in a card?
No.
Okay, you'll have to
Can
do
I
that when
tag
you're
on
done.
his card?
Well, no, you have to put it in.
Could
You can fill it out after you speak.
The point that you made, Dan,
Can you get closer to the microphone?
Speaking to the mic. So we
the
hear
point
you.
that you made, Dan, about a calendar year, is this 8 months in a calendar year? So do we
Yes.
get to a point where if a mission happens in October and we slip into the following year, do we have to come back again and do this again for the next year? That, a rolling 8 months would be what I thought we would be working with, because we don't have a crystal ball necessarily what a customer's launch schedule will do. They weather happens, hurricanes happen, missions happen, rocket, first stage, second stage, satellites happens. So if we run into a calendar year and then you have to do this process all over again, that would be a bit constraining compared to the actual operations of launch campaigns.
It says no more than 2 temporary office units are permitted per property at any given time. The total amount of time temporary office units shall be placed on the property is 6 months in any calendar year.
So, for example, if you started 4 months before the end of the year in September, and the temporary units stay through those 4 months and then 2 months into the following year, those 2 months are now subtracted from the rest of the following year if you needed to add a temporary unit in the upcoming year.
So if you start in August, you have 5 months in 2021 and then 1 month in 2022. Then you could ask for 2 more months. It would take you up until March. Then it would have to be removed.
Well, is there any reason why this just can't be reworded so it
Sure
says
could.
Shall be placed on the property for a 6-month continuous time period and leave about
For a
calendar
6-month
year?
continuous period.
Right.
And the term
We don't need
calendar
in there.
year be omitted, please?
The concern
that
with
solve
that,
it?
the concern with that is then how long does a temporary office space need to be removed to be eligible for a new 6-month period?
6 months consecutive would do it.
So then if the temporary storage unit is removed for a day and brought back, that's an additional 6 months. And that's an extreme
What
case.
is your suggestion?
Calendar year seems appropriate to manage that. At this point, I don't have any other suggestion.
I mean, it seems to me it should be 6 months from
From
the
the
date the
start
permit is approved.
date. I mean, could you,
Okay, Member Rice is next. Then Member Richardson, you're after him, and then Member.
I just want to make sure I understand, but let's say this is really successful. Your long-term goal would then be to put permanent structures on the
If
site.
customer
Okay.
base supported a.
Okay, because
long-term-
one of the notes I made when I read the ordinance is that if they're in site plan approval process to put in permanent office space, the temporary space can continue until they issue the permit for the office space. And that way, if they get because the only reason why that's important is because they're so successful that they're needing the office space more and more and more and more. And which means we need to kick them into getting permanent office space, but not tell them they have to move something right now while they're trying to build their new office space.
Mm-hmm.
And that would extend the permit as long as the site permit application was active. If they let it go dormant, then that doesn't apply. And that was one of my thoughts of what we're trying to accomplish here.
That, I don't believe that that's specifically in the ordinance. Are you saying?
No, it's not in the ordinance.
Okay, that's your suggestion.
This is just something that I was thinking when I read the ordinance, you know, the word temporary meant, hey, there's a need, but as need demands get higher, the frequency gets higher, and they need to come in and get their building permit for permanent office space. But don't just kick them out because their 8 months is up.
So
okay?
what you're
Let them
suggesting,
continue to use the temporary until the permanent one is built. And that would automatically extend that temporary use until the new office building was
We're not
built.
quite there yet.
are you suggesting?
No, but what I'm trying to do is prevent where we go back, 2 years from now or 3 years from now, that the need is so great, and then we have to rewrite an ordinance because now you need the temporary while you're under construction for the permanent. Okay?
I agree that would be a good idea. To
I mean, that was sort of my train of thought. Okay.
Member Richardson.
Yes, I shared with you earlier at my term at Oak Ridge National Labs. We leased office trailers for 6 months. They ended up staying 5 years because of the success and the delay of the business. And I think you may not be reasonable on yourself that you can do it all in 8 months.
Well, the issue at hand is, remember,
Get over the mic so we hear you.
I promise I'll fill out a card. Normally, there's time between the missions, and it's kind of a first come, first serve. So when the bays are full, the high bays are full, we have to turn people away. But that really doesn't happen. But that's the way it would happen. What has happened is these missions have become on top of each other, and there's just such a huge number for this particular time. Last time was 2009. If the crystal balls are great and we're able to do this going into the future, wonderful, but we're not quite there yet. To the point about them possibly staying, because of the immediate need, we don't have a place where we would keep them permanently. We're going to put these on existing blacktop, and that's not ideal.
And your property is approximately, I remember, 26 acres?
62.
62 acres.
And if you've noticed,
allowing 2 office trailers within an acre, I understand. Maybe the amount of office trailers maximum should go up with acreage. So you might have 4 customers that have to have office trailers instead of just 2.
Right, but
and I'm just saying that if it's changed, like Member Jordan recommended, it be changed to 1 acre. There's a big difference in 1 acre and 2 office trailers and 62 acres. How many office trailers then?
well, 62 acres, of which 12 are developed with buildings on them. So we have a lot of virgin forests, and if you notice, I've been in some of the other meetings about, our eventual growth needing to maybe address trees so we can plant another high bay with offices. But that's not in the immediate. This is something that we need to address and get resolution on fairly quick. I appreciate the amount of time and energy you're all putting into this.
Member Brand?
Yeah, I sort of, like to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They need this right away, so they don't want to complicate it. So it's actually very narrow to what they need today. And I think, there's the ability to broaden it a little bit, still protect the city and not end up with 5 years later that the trailers are still on the site, because I know that's not the goal either. but it would, it would seem whether it's them coming back, which hopefully there's a high likelihood that they would because they're very successful and good for the city, or some other business in industrial that may have the same need. I kind of equate this with schools. There was a period of time where every school you went to, there were temporary classrooms everywhere because they ran out of capacity. And hopefully as their business grows and other businesses, if there's a way to kind of anticipate that now so we're not back here again doing something quickly, it'd be great. If it's going to bog it down, then let's get them taken care of and then revisit it soon.
Remember, Aton, I agree with you completely, but it takes more than 2 months to amend an ordinance.
Member Rice.
Well, I have a solution to that now. Sitting here thinking you guys discussions or response something, I would say that we change the ordinance. We make it the administrator. 6 months and 2 months is the administrator. If you need more than 2 months, you go to city council to extend it beyond the 2 months. And then the city council can decide we're going to grant it for another 6 months or 8 months or whatever it is. And then that sort of gives us the flexibility, but the administrator's locked in at 6 + 2, and city council can extend beyond that.
And not constrained by calendar year?
I'm sorry?
Not constrained by calendar year?
Right. 6 continuous months. Okay. Any other questions by the commission or any additional comments by the applicant? Any other comments? Any additional comments by staff?
We still have a public comment card.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Stan Johnston.
Stan Johnson, 860 Poinsett Avenue. I'm here as representing myself as a professional engineer, and I think you're doing a good job working on this particular problem. I appreciate what Woody Rice had to say. I thought it was very good. It looks like you're going along to a solution. I'm here because also I have written comments on this item. I have here an email from Peggy Bisaka that says that she has provided my email to P&Z and TEC as requested. That email, I think, is over 20 pages long, and I'm here to make sure that everybody has received that, including Mr. Anthem. So I'm asking that question, that it's been received, and I want to make sure because it has to do with. I'll just read just a little quick thing about it. This is these written comments pertain to 11 measures by the City of Titusville regarding the concealment by city. The Florida Today and Hometown News of dishonesty, violation of laws, violation of engineering principles, obvious, easily proven scams, hoaxes, frauds by city officials, including blank, 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 and so forth, and asking the, for example, city manager to tell the truth or resign. Because
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, sir.
Is that on this subject?
It is.
Could you tell me how?
Okay. If you look at, and it's listed on in the long subject title.
I understand that. I saw
okay.
it.
I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah,
I don't know if you. Beg your pardon.
I saw it.
Okay.
Your email.
Okay. All right. Okay. And it says here, for example, it says it says in here about Mr. Galindo. He's here. He's working on this right now. So I believe that's important. It says here in the title. It says the fraudulent report resilient Titusville prepared by, including Mr. Galindo, Mr. Parrish, that deliberately omits, ignores unpaid floodways, and so forth and so forth. So Mr. Galindo is contributing to this, and so therefore I have put him as it is pertinent to this and all agenda item subjects.
Well, do you have a comment with regard to the ordinance, which is temporary offices within planned industrial, which is the issue?
I began with that, and I mentioned about Woody Rice, saying he was doing a good job of this particular ordinance. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so maybe you can answer.
What are your comments about this ordinance?
Well, that's what I'm saying is that my comments have to do with, first of all, I did say, Mr. Woody Rice, and I think that you're doing a good job, and that's what you have done so far in this tonight in deliberating this issue. So I'm just about to close.
Okay.
I'm closing, and so the question is for example, did Mr. Anton receive this? He's supposed to receive it according to the code. My email.
I have no control over staff.
Well, I mean, someone should, maybe Mr. Anton can answer.
They've made a lot of stuff available to me. I haven't had a chance since yesterday afternoon.
Okay, all right.
All right, thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
you.
I don't want to interrupt what you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay. Bringing the ordinance back before the commission. I think all of us are certainly in favor of proceeding with this and doing whatever is needed or necessary. I guess one additional question I had, what is staff's recommendation, 5 acres or 1 acre?
I don't know that there's a definitive answer. We've tried to provide the maps to give you as much information as possible as far as how many properties and where that they would be impacted. But really, that decision's up to the commission.
You don't have a recommendation one way or the other then? I know we have the maps and we can read those, but I didn't. As I understood it, your original draft ordinance was 5 acres. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, and based upon comments at the council meeting, you've changed it to 1. Okay, so I assume your recommendation is 1. Otherwise, you wouldn't have presented it that way. It is now. Okay. That's what I'm trying to get to. All right. Member Rice.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions of staff. I just want to make sure I understand everything that's in here. Under, on page 38, item C1A, it says the 1 acre. Is that 1 acre for 2 or 1 acre for 1?
It's 2 per property, and the property must be at least 1 acre.
Okay, so I can have 2 on a 1 acre tract.
That's how the code's
And then the size of the office building is not mentioned anywhere, how big of a unit I can put.
No, but the additional language was added to C because determining the size would determine the size of the site plan.
Okay.
And so that's where that comes into play.
And my next question then sort of is driven because it's a Class 1 permit, which I think is appropriate. But I know in Class 1 permit, anything over 1,000 square feet of new impervious area kicks it to a Class 2 automatically.
I think this particular applicant's planning on using existing impervious area as the base for the temporary office. So that is a factor in the site plan.
Well, just know that, and they can solve that problem in site plan review. But, you know, there is 1,000 square foot limitation on new impervious surface. Parking, we're not doing anything with parking with the additional office space. Is that a correct statement? No additional parking needs to be provided. It's whatever you have on site.
No additional, it just is not allowed to be on required parking spaces.
Right.
Or impede driveway access.
It can't be on it, but it's not requiring.
No additional is listed
additional
here.
parking anywhere for, in this case, this need is 30, up to 30 people, because it's 30 desks that they're putting in.
During the site plan review, we'd have to take into consideration any additional parking that would be required to accommodate those additional spaces.
And how are you handling temporary parking then? In site plan review, I'm just curious.
I can't.
Because there's city code that says you're not allowed to park on grass unless you're in an area of critical concern. Otherwise, that has to be an impervious surface. And to put an impervious surface down for a temporary office space doesn't seem logical. Okay, so do we need to include something in here that allows to rope off, as long as it's not in a landscape area that's been landscaped, to allow temporary parking on an unpaved section, even if you're outside the area of critical concern. Okay, that's just something that came to my mind. That's it. That was all my notes that I had on this topic. But I do think we need to discuss how we're going to do the parking if it's going through a site plan review process.
Mr. Rice, I just have to ask your opinion. Would you recommend parking off impervious
I don't
surface?
think it's logical that we would say you can have a temporary office, but you have to pave a parking lot, to make it impervious area. So I think you should grant that the office parking, unless you have access, if you have access on your site for your development, because the code allows excess parking to be developed. So if someone already has beyond what the code minimum need, then you don't need to provide anymore, okay? But if you have the exact code minimum and you're putting office space here, then I say you do temporary grass parking, allow it, okay? Because it's on a temporary basis.
If I could ask the applicant a question, as I understand, you have adequate parking to accommodate these two offices, temporary offices?
Yes. Astrotek has about 180 parking spots. And we have additional paved areas where we can
So it's
place
a non-issue for
us.
For you.
But, because this is an expanded consideration, I do appreciate that thought because it would provide flexibility for smaller needs. And a thought occurred to me while we were sort of talking a little bit. Dan's just down the street from us. If we get hit by a hurricane and his office space is unable to handle transactions, but his work areas are, he might be tempted to bring in an office, if you will, a wheeled office or a temporary office like we're doing. So just because of the uniqueness of where we are off the coast, this may be a very helpful thing. So having flexibility where it makes sense on smaller properties, that might mean I didn't intend to have parking designed this way, but if I had the flexibility where I can use this grassed area and maybe some of my operations ends up in my parking area, just to stay in business, that might not be a bad thing to have. But for our purposes, we pretty much are able to accommodate. May mean that some of the people have to walk a little bit further than they normally would, but we should be able to do that.
Member Richardson.
He just pointed out something to me that is legal in nature, and I'll ask Chelsea. If Member Aton votes for this in the industrial park, is it a conflict of interest?
I am not as familiar as maybe other people about what Mr. Aton may own or have as an asset in this industrial park, but my guess would be that he would be of a class large enough that he's not going to have a specific financial gain or loss from the passage of this ordinance. If he feels different based on his knowledge of his financial impact from this, that he would have an impact that I don't know about, then he may abstain due to that conflict. But there has to be a significant financial gain or loss that would be felt by the voting member or their family. And it has to be a small enough class that they would be required to abstain. And I would presume that the class of industrial property owners is quite large in the city of Titusville.
I think that would partly depend upon whether it's 5 acres or 1.
It could.
It might make a significant difference.
Do you feel comfortable in voting?
Yeah.
Okay.
I see no way this brings any benefit financially, unless there's a hurricane and then
Can't hear you, sir.
I said I think that we may, unless there's a hurricane, there may be a whole long line of people here that need some temporary office space. So.
We certainly agree with you. Okay, any other discussion or questions or staff comments? We need a motion. As far as the recommendation of the city council, Member Rice.
I'm going to take a stab at a motion to approve, get the ordinance number here. Oh, it doesn't have an ordinance number, but to approve this ordinance with the following changes, as staff written with the following changes. Under C1B, we put in administrator for the 6 months plus 2 months, and add additional time may be extended by city council. And then add a new section under C that I guess would be O now, that temporary grass parking may be approved by the administrator. So it
Would that be okay in H where it talks about parking?
yeah, that'd be fine. Wherever you guys think it'd be, but temporary grass, temporary pervious parking may be approved during the site plan process, the Class 1 permitting process.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the motion? Roll call.
Secretary Richardson,
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry. Secretary.
Secretary Richardson,
Yes.
Member Porter,
Yes.
Member Aton,
Yes.
Member Rice,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Spidell,
Yes.
Member Grant,
Yes.
Chairman Severs.
Yes.
Chairman, just to clarify, since the last portion that Member Rice mentioned was during the Site 1 permitting process, that temporary pervious parking would only be approved, only may be approved during.
And the reason why I said may is because if you can show that you have excess parking already, you don't need it. And we don't want to encourage to park on grass unless they absolutely need it.
And that's only eligible for properties that are currently under consideration for Class 1 site permit for the temporary structures, or for, like the earlier discussion, for something more permanent.
I'm sorry?
At one point, there was a discussion about the site permit being for permanent, like a permanent expansion, as opposed to, so I just wanted to make sure.
And the reason,
That wasn't a part of the
that
motion.
wasn't part of the motion, and
No.
here's the reason why I decided not to make that part of the motion, because city council now has the power to extend this beyond the 8 months while they're going through a site plan process to do it permanent.
Got it, thank you.
Okay, and that made sense to me.
I don't think that you meant to limit it to just Class 1. It would be any permits under review. If it was Class 1 or Class 2, then they could have this temporary parking and pervious parking? Or is it only if it's a Class 1?
This whole thing goes through a Class 1 site permit process, okay? And so when staff analyzes the parking, if they need additional parking, then staff can approve a pervious surface parking, grass or mulch or what have you.
Well, I think one of the changes was to include language so that it wasn't, say, at a minimum, a Class 1 permit, in case the expansion is substantial enough to necessitate a Class 2 permit. And so I think what Chelsea's getting at is we want to make sure that it's at a minimum a Class 1 permit in case it is a Class 2.
That's fine.
Okay, does that stand for
If it
the
kicks
rest of the
into Class
commission?
2, it's still the same intent.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Clarified? Okay. One of the things that was discussed under 9A was the possibility of making Member Spidell an additional motion to ask council to review the outdoor seating and outdoor entertainment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you want to make that as a motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
Could you?
Clarify?
Yes, could you clarify that again?
Yeah.
Please.
And we what I understood the previous discussion was, since the microbrewery ordinance only dealt with allowance or non-allowance, and there was concern that have been previously expressed about outdoor seating, for example, or outdoor entertainment, we wanted the city council to direct staff to review that further, to possibly an ordinance. Council has not directed that previously. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'm going to add one thing. I mentioned entertainment next to water, and then I researched that goes up almost 70% in sound. And those are the properties that we're most concerned with on the lagoon.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. I don't see any further discussion.
I would like to just ask if the motion regarding outdoor seating is to amend the existing code 28-361 outdoor areas of seating to include additional zoning categories, or if there's anything other.
All of the above.
Okay.
For example, there's no outdoor seating addressed in the SMU. Okay, roll call.
Member Aton?
Yes.
Member Rice?
Yes.
Secretary Richardson?
Yes.
Member Grant?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Spidell? Yes. Member Porter?
Yes.
Chairman Severs?
Yes. Okay, going back on the agenda to item 8A, which we skipped earlier. Do we have any cards on that item?
No, sir.
No? Okay. As you may recall, this is your opportunity, if there's items that you wish that the Planning and Zoning Commission and/or staff review, report back to us, that would ultimately lead to possible ordinance changes or recommendations. This is your opportunity to bring some of those up at this time if you want to.
Eddie came prepared.
You pardon?
Eddie came prepared.
Okay.
So to help facilitate the discussion, this is similar to the activity that was done at the Titusville Environmental Commission. The way that it worked with the TEC is that we went basically down the line and asked the members to identify topics that you thought were a high priority. And then at the end, once we have our longer list, allow each of the members to pick their top three, or if you need to change the number, that's fine. But that's how it worked out at TEC. And that way we can rank and report back to you on what the winning topics are that are the highest priority for the commission. So I guess moving from my left to right, if we want to, and if you don't have anything this first round and in the next round you want to add something to the list, we can do that as well. I'll try to present it as easily as possible, and my handwriting's not the best, so I apologize in advance. But Member Porter, do you have something you wanted to add to the list?
I'd like to hear what council thinks about low impact development.
Anything else, Member Porter?
Preservation of Indian River Lagoon.
Let's do one at a time, and then we'll go back around just to make sure we get everyone's feedback. Member Grant?
No, he read my mind.
You read your, is that what that
Twice.
is? Okay. So, if you heard what we Chairman Severs?
I have a list that I'm going to pass out.
Oh, okay.
One at a time.
Did you happen to rank them?
No, I didn't. They're all important.
Okay.
It's probably a volume.
For Randolph.
Sure. Thanks.
So do you want to pick one to add now, or?
I'll start with the bottom of the list. I got this one from Member Rice when he spoke before council. I think it was July 16th. Considering within the area critical concern elimination of curb and guttering and the use of swales or other low impact development.
Got it.
And we certainly could do that by ordinance. We'll start with that one. Start from the bottom.
Member Snyder.
Environment, landscaping, shrubs, trees. And preservation of existing vegetation.
Okay. Member Rice.
Okay, I'm not going to add to this, but I do have a comment.
Sure.
I'm pretty overwhelmed with everything that's coming at me with TEC and you. And what is going to overwhelm this body.
Can't hear you, sir.
Even overwhelm this body even more is after hearing the comprehensive plan that's going to get forward to the state, that's the first step in a process that's long and arduous with you pass your comp plan, then you have to write all these land development regulations to implement the comp plan. So this body's going to get hammered with a lot of ordinances to implement new strategies in the comp plan. And we're going to get so overwhelmed that adding to a list may be hard to fit some of these items. I'm not saying these aren't important items. The good news is that the things I believe in, like LID and the tree canopy ordinance, we're in the middle of that process. So we're going to accomplish that goal. That's a great goal to have. Yeah. Okay. But that's my train of thought is just, there's a lot here coming at us in the near future. Because I take it that all the LDRs that implement the comp plan are going to come to P&Z for recommendation to the city council. Is that a true statement?
I don't know the next step, but that makes sense that in order to implement the comp plan, there would need to be some LDR changes, correct? I will say that when this activity was requested by the Titusville Environmental Commission, it helped to focus their attention. And what was happening in their meetings is that at the end of the meeting, they would want to throw on a certain topic without much research. And so the commission found themselves researching things that they didn't think were top priority. And so this helped them to focus on what they thought were top priority. I see your concern that by creating this list when there's already work to be done, that might bog down things.
Well, I just know when we prioritize, our list that we have, doing the business of the city of Titusville is probably the number one list, item on the list, because those have certain time constraints that have to be accomplished.
Sure.
Okay. TEC, I looked at it a little differently, is that it's a very focused group for environmental. That's their focus, and they didn't have a list. Okay, and I thought it was important to establish that list there. This body has such a broad reach on topics that we can consider. That's sort of, and I'm just overwhelmed with everything that's going to be coming at me. So I'm happy to listen to everyone's list. I'll grade them. But just keep in mind the workload that we're getting ready to face.
Sure. Member Richardson?
Yeah, I quite frankly think it's basic communications. We have poor communications with city council. Just consider the old-fashioned butt whipping we took last Tuesday night.
Yes.
Where I'll quote Member Jordan, frankly, I don't like what's going on at P&Z as it relates to making sure that everybody gets a fair shake. And they told us that we were taking the priorities wrong, that the 2040 comp plan should come before the tree ordinance and the lid ordinance. Well, I talked to Brad about that, and I questioned, didn't we pass the 2040 comp plan and give her permission to send it to the state already? He said, yes, you did, back in September. And it's not come up the second time. I got the impression from last meeting we had he received comments from the state. So, you know, personally, I may make a lot of people mad tonight, but how many P&Z meetings have we asked for Mrs. Busacki to be here? How many has she been here in the last 2 years? None. And she was the one with Gabriel that facilitated the tree ordinance a year ago. And Gabriel has left. And I think the city is putting the cart before the horse. And it's taken too long to draft these ordinances. So we're blamed for everything that goes on, the P&Z is, that we're taking too much time. And I think we better have better communications with council. In fact, we probably need a workshop meeting for TEC and P&Z with council.
New guy card, no answer? Okay. Ed Brown?
No, they're all on your list already. Yep.
All good? Chairman Severs?
I'm not sure whether or not Member Spidell covered mine. She may have about requiring landscaping within the area of critical concern. You did, okay, to be limited. That's my item 1B. So I'll go to C, within the area of critical concern throughout the city to require a certain percentage of the landscaping, plants, shrubs, trees to be native and drought tolerant. I put 75% in there. I know many jurisdictions that have a requirement. We have native or drought tolerant or suggested or recommended, and we'll give you a list. But I frankly have traveled around a lot of new subdivisions, and I see a lot that are not native, don't even come close to it. And whether we want to realize it or not, we have a limited water resource. And if we are watering a St. Augustine grass or high water demand plants whenever they can be drought tolerant, I think we ought to be sensitive to that. And many jurisdictions have a set minimum, maybe 40%, it may be 75%. But I think it's time to cross over to reality and realize, as we're growing with this limited water resource, even though I was heavily involved in getting 2 to 3 million gallons a day more water for the city of Titusville, that's limited. It's not unlimited. And we need to be sensitive about that. So I would recommend under item C.
Got here is native plants in the ACC.
Yes.
I don't remember seeing anything about electronics charging stations for that strategic plan. And I think as things are developing, and because of the length of the plan, that some technological elements need to be included. It also may include broadband wiring within the city too. So all of that is technically part of a greater national infrastructure plan too. And I don't remember seeing that. I may have just overlooked it. Can you clarify that, Eddie?
As far as if there's anything about electric charging stations.
Anything related to the
In the
future.
comp plan?
Yeah, in the comp plan. About broadband, electric charging stations, things that are infrastructured and
Right.
deal with future growth.
I would imagine there is. I don't specifically remember a policy, but I will say that the city has already started to work on that. So if it's not already in the comp plan, it's something that we're seeing. You know, we have charging stations at the Welcome Center. We've seen the new Tesla electric vehicle charging stations installed at the Target Plaza, and so they're popping up around town. There is a need for them, and that's kind of being actualized today versus in the comp plan. But I can look at that and see if there's a specific policy about electric charging stations.
I think looking towards the future, for the length of time that the strategic plan covers, that things dealing with not immediate needs, which are trees and roads and plants and the things that we've been used to, but that we need to forecast those needs too. And they include lots of things related to technological infrastructure.
Does electric vehicle charging stations cover your suggestion, or did you want to add?
Well, I was thinking more of technological infrastructure and including broadband too. And I don't know the status of broadband within the city right now or whether that should be included. So it's more of a question to you.
Okay, so you don't
Is
know.
it being covered? I would not think that commercial development, as in charging stations at Target, should be a city objective. That's Target's
Right.
objective.
And like
But-
I mentioned, there are some city facilities that have been improved with electric vehicle charging stations. So
Right,
it's
but
something
I
to
don't
take
know,
note on.
I don't know the number.
Right.
Okay, I changed my mind.
Okay.
I think we, and I don't know if this is just can be an administrative policy or we need a policy on how to use our landscape trust fund, whether it's forest or urban forestry program or whatever. But we have a landscape trust fund that money is collected from development because of mitigation, but we're not we really haven't earmarked that for something that's appropriate tree-wise, and that's probably where it should be. That money should go. So I think we need to address the landscape trust fund and the use of those funds.
Sure, I'll add it. And just for your, the commission's knowledge, my understanding is that the Public Works Department does have a majority of the funds earmarked for gateway landscaping improvement, but I don't know more about that. So maybe that's something that we could ask Public Works to provide more information to the commission.
I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but we've been hit several times with these studies that show that we're the most, Brevard County is one of the most dangerous places for walkability and bicycling. And we haven't really addressed that problem. We've got to look at intersections, how they can be managed better by signaling or something, and try to eliminate as much as possible these injuries and accidents and deaths that we're having in the city. Particularly, I'm concerned about Garden Street and US 1 and Hopkins. That is a very dangerous situation. And we've got to somehow address those. Well, not only in the comp plan, but strengthen some ordinances that address that. Walkability, for example.
So we recently approved the Titusville mobility plan, which I don't know if it addressed the safety features, but for the purposes of writing it down in this activity, would it capture it by saying non-motor vehicle safety? Does that capture what you're...
Well, in a sense, it does.
Okay. Pedestrian? Well, I didn't want to just say pedestrian in case you were thinking bicyclists or other modes of transportation.
Yeah.
Anything?
I'll withdraw my new guy card. Okay. So building on Member Richardson's comments, one of my pet peeves is, and this goes back to I was part of Greater Titusville Renaissance Board, is and we explored it a lot, but, you know, the comment was how to revitalize downtown, but all of the feedback was US 1's too fast. Even though we were told by DOT when they rebuilt it, it would slow it down, instead it sped it up. And I realize it's a DOT road and all that, but if there's any way at all to figure out a way to slow down downtown, short of rerouting US 1 in the downtown area, like Melbourne did, but it just seems like something that should be solvable, but nobody seems to know how to solve it.
Reducing speeds on US 1?
Especially in the downtown district.
Okay.
Yeah. But as Titus Landing and the new Titusville Mall develops and the residential units across the street, it's going to be a problem in other parts of US 1 too. And just as a point of information, I'm a geek, a car geek, an electronics geek, and everything geek, so I can help you out on some of the technology things.
Back around?
Pass.
One of my other one, and 2015 or 2017, I'm not sure exactly when. I have asked before, but I never got an answer. When these two items, A1 and 2, were eliminated from the code, but they were eliminated from the code. I had recommended these as a part of the comprehensive planning process. And as I recall, Water Resources supported those. These are provisions that were originally in our area critical concern ordinance. I think in particular A2 needs to be placed back in. And so that's another one I'd like to add.
It looks like these could be summarized by saying reducing change in topography within the ACC. Does that capture it?
No.
Okay. Please help me. That's fine.
I just think the initial clearing needs to be within the rights-of-way or utility areas or the retention areas as such. Rather than using the Brookshire example, everything is gone. I know we have had development under this code. I think Mr. Rice was involved in that previously as a city engineer on the north side of American Village when just the rights-of-way were cleared and the trees were left. And fundamentally, as I've pointed out in the past, half of our water supply comes from Area 2 Wellfield. It's depleting because of development. It's essential for the water quality and quantity that you preserve the natural resources such as trees, shrubs, etc. That's the whole basis of the 1986 study that formed the area of critical concern. And I think something like this needs to be back in the code as it was from 1986 to 2015 or whenever it was taken out.
So if I heard you right, you mentioned clearing within the right-of-ways first.
Yes.
So do you mean clearing in phases?
Clearing in what?
In phases, as in clearing within the rights-of-ways first, developing the rights-of-ways, and then clearing in a separate phase to clear for the lots?
Yes, a separate phase for that.
Okay.
At the time, usually at the time of construction of a house.
Okay, so does that capture then if we say separate phasing for?
Okay, we all know what you're talking about.
I just want to make sure what I write down captures what your
Okay,
intent is.
okay, that's okay.
Okay.
I'll remind you if
I
you.
can shed a little light on what we did, if you want me to.
Sure.
Okay. System Meadows was another one that we did similar. We did the right-of-ways, but we also did 10 foot inside the property lines of the lots. because that's where utilities go, electric, you know, a lot of things like that. So you always went 10 feet in, okay, and then left the topography and tried to grade it out to the topography that was left. And then each building house came in for their permit. That's when we addressed the site grading specifically and the trees specifically for that lot. That's how we did it.
Got it.
Thank you.
Next. Okay.
There's a couple of them, but I'll name one. A few years ago, like 20 or 30 years ago, water reuse was the in thing. And you'll see these purple pipes in different commercial areas of the city, which are broken down. And there's not an emphasis on water reuse like there used to be. In fact, I think all of La Cita is a water reuse area. We should put an emphasis on that again. And when we consider zonings, we should consider the reuse of water extended to that area.
Extended to what area? Sorry?
To that area. If a new subdivision is coming in.
Okay. Just so you know, I think one of the issues with reuse is the capacity, that there's not enough reuse to provide new development. But as the commission continues to explore that, I just wanted to give you a heads up that I think that's one of the concerns with it.
Not only that, part of the emphasis, I know with the city, is to use reuse close to the area of critical concern because it helps the recharge. And so typically the city doesn't, you know, my experience with the city has been that new development, unless you're in the area of critical concern, they're not going to approve you for reuse.
Well,
and that's sort of been the standing policy because the demand for reuse is so great. We don't have enough reuse water to meet the demand. Is part of the problem.
It'll be coming.
Right. I'm going to write reuse now.
And if water reuse was used in the areas of critical concern, we destroy that area when you consider Brookshire. That should be the emphasis, that area.
Back over to you. All good? Okay.
Good.
Royce?
One more thing.
Sure.
Years ago, again, we established a one-stop permitting plan, and Truman Scarborough was mayor. So that if someone came in for develop a subdivision or commercial property, they were told everything they needed at one time. It made development a lot better and a lot faster. And I think we've kind of slipped from that. So we should consider that again. Take a look at the permitting process and how long it takes for site plans to be reviewed and things like that, and see where we can reduce that time.
Okay. I know we currently do what's called pre-application meetings and even pre-application meetings where we'll have the different departments within the same room to help answer and facilitate questions either during the design phase or even before it. I don't know the specifics on the one-stop permitting as far as what was involved in that, but we'll take a look at that as well.
And before we conclude this aspect, Mr. Johnson, you've put in a card.
Yes.
We'd like to hear from you now.
Okay, good. Thank you, sir. I beg your pardon because what happened was that I came in later and I wanted to speak on this, but I thought it was already passed. I mean, I already went through it, so now I'm speaking. So I'm putting in a card. So I have 8 items that I've written out, and I'll list them to read them to you. I'm going to give it to Eddie, It's, I have June 2nd, 2021, strategic planning topics by Stan Johnson, PE. Number 1 is correction of firm maps. That is correction of numbered flood zone elevations disputed by the 1985 freshwater management study. Then I put in parentheses, note, over 9 square miles of city limits affected. Number 2 is address the closed door policy by council and city manager. I'm going to stop that because that's included somewhere else. Number 3, address the maintenance of unmaintained floodways outside of city limits as required by logic, the stormwater master plan, and FEMA regulations. Number 4, city to make corrections to city's dam designs, such as consideration of compensatory storage requirements and effects to private property, and the review of the 100-year storm event and firm map, which has not been done on several dams. Number 5 is address the spraying of the public with sewage-laden water via fountains should be prohibited. Number 6, address the closed door policy by city manager and council. That is, and I'll put in parentheses, counterproductive to communication and problem solving. Number 7, do something about this dishonesty and fraud to discredit Stan Johnson, me, PE, regarding a non-existent 2019 $70,000 report allegedly prepared by Geosyntech Consultants, in parentheses, who denies the report. Number 8, define and enforce breezeways. Parking lots should not be considered breezeways, and shouldn't have a fence across a breezeway either. I go back to number 2, and that is the address the closed door policy of council and city manager, and it's counterproductive to open discussion, and then discourages problem solving. So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
So I'll give that to Eddie.
Thank you. I don't know what your plan was, but what I would like to see is you pack those up, distribute it to the commission members, and not at our June 16th meeting because we have a full agenda. But at our next meeting, then we can prioritize. If we could, in the meantime, individually send just to staff, not anybody else, what our respective priorities are, and that way you will have the information and you could prioritize. Based upon, is there any other additions or corrections anyone would like to make?
I just want to ask, Chairman, for clarification, did all of your concerns get onto?
Pretty well.
Okay.
Pretty well. Yes, thank you.
Did Mrs. Ward put in the card?
Okay. Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, that takes care of that item, and now we are at petitions and requests from the public.
I have 2 cards.
2 cards, okay.
Stan Johnston.
Well, let's let Laura Ward go first. She's halfway up.
So thank you for letting me go early, but after your discussion, I did want to come back up and say, the way I'm understanding it now, the staff will suggest to the city council that they be allowed to review the outdoor seating and outdoor entertainment.
Correct.
At which time it starts a new round of coming here.
Correct.
Okay. I just want, in case I'm not here or can't be here, I would like for you to please remember when you're talking about this that outdoor seating is not an issue as far as I'm personally concerned, because, you know, it's a restaurant. We're in Florida. We like to eat outside. And I think any restaurant should be able to have that, providing there are not some other circumstances that need to be considered. So right now, do I understand that a conditional use permit would be the way to go on reviewing any request for outdoor seating or outdoor entertainment by an existing restaurant? Is that what it all worked out to?
As I recall, under the brew pub, if someone wanted to locate one within SMU district, if they're within 100 feet of a residence.
Where did the 100 feet come from?
That was a suggestion.
Oh, okay, that's a suggestion.
I remember right.
Yeah, right, it was Woody.
100 feet of a single-family residence, then that requires a conditional use where there'd be a public hearing, the whole process. If it's beyond 100 feet, then it's under the limited category and more than likely would be permitted.
Okay, so maybe that should be relooked at, because 100.
I stated it wrong.
No, you got it right. I just wanted to add one other thing, that the specific to outdoor areas of seating, the existing code provides that certain limitations are provided, and in the DMU, outdoor areas of seating shall require a conditional use permit if music or other entertainment is proposed with the outdoor area of seating. So that's existing code.
Okay. But that's just DMU, that's not SMU, and I know you're worried about SMU.
Yeah, I mean, okay, basically, what Woody said was correct. SMU just stretches out all along the coast, and many areas it picks up where residences are. Downtown mixed use, people choose to live downtown mixed use because they like, activity going on around them. But back to what I think is important, certainly for the SMU that I've had experience with. Allowing outdoor seating is fine, but it's the amplified music outside that just is so disturbing to residents. So I think outdoor entertainment should be prohibited. And then if an establishment wants to have, like, I don't know, Harold used to have Pumpkin Day party. So they get a special use permit just a certain number of times a year, a reasonable number of times a year, where they could have the music for a special occasion. But boy, really, you should not allow that music outside. Remember, it's a restaurant. They got a building. That's what the building's for, is to have noisy stuff inside the building where the windows can be shut. And then that's the way I think that's certainly been our experience. We used to have major fights, squabbles, arguments, calls, on and on until it got settled, and it was settled that way. Outside seating, great. No outside entertainment unless you have a permit, and a reasonable number of times of year is limited to a reasonable number. And everybody gets along fine with that. So
okay. Thank you for your input.
You can remember me if I'm not here. Pretend you heard me say it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, did you have a card in? I do. Go ahead. Your turn.
Stan Johnston, I'm addressing you tonight as a professional engineer and with my email that I sent you. And an email I sent today also. It has to do with some secrecy, dishonesty, closed doors, and injuries to the public. That particular email that I sent is addressed to Bill Nelson and other people. And so Mr. Anthony, I hope that he can get a copy of that too. And what it is, it's the email long is an extension of this email. So it's over 20 pages long, but the email sent today is only about 2 pages long. But it identifies a number of the atrocity it identifies especially is mentioned here in the email that you have, and that is the failure to respond to the secret illegal discharge of sewage into the Indian River, and failure to respond to the spraying of the people with sewage-laden water that was from the fountains that were on for a period of 2 months. So we're requesting that's me and some other people are requesting a criminal investigation of members of council, city staff, and including PNC and TEC. That's you guys. So you're not going to like this, but I'm reading to you your Miranda rights, because we need to be truthful. And a lot of people, this is happening because there's an incredible amount of dishonesty that I've provided to you on this. So what you have is you have the right to remain silent. Anything you can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with you while you are being questioned. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you before any question if you wish. You can decide at any time to exercise these rights and not answer any question or make any statements. So I'm urging you to read this email that I've sent today, and to consider that there is an outrageous amount of dishonesty, deception, and cover-up within the city of Titusville. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to address the commission? Not seeing any. Under report, summary of action.
And I'm not 100% familiar. Does staff normally read the summary of action to the commission? Okay.
Is there any item you want to highlight?
Yes, sir. So item 9A on page 51 and 54, that's the comp plan. And it's been talked about, I think someone mentioned it earlier today, but council requested that the Planning and Zoning Commission consider this item no later than their meeting scheduled for June 16th and provide a recommendation to City Council. Unfortunately, it couldn't have been this meeting because of the advertising requirements, and so the only meeting that you have for that would be June 16th, and City Council is asking for your recommendation. The other item is on page 53 of 54. That's item 10B, ordinance number 14/2021, low impact development. And in that, council requested that the Planning and Zoning Commission consider this item and provide a recommendation to the City Council by the first regular City Council meeting in July of 2021. The first council meeting is going to be July 13th, and so this will appear on your next meeting agenda, June 16th, but you will have the option to table it to July 7th if needed, because that will be ahead of the council's July 13th meeting. And that's it.
TEC is going to meet on that when?
Next week.
Next week. So if TEC gives us a recommendation by that meeting, we're fine.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions concerning the summary? City staff.
Yes, sir. I have a couple things. The first is the Explore Historic Titusville booklet that I'll hand out. So that's a booklet that has some historic facts, stories. It comes with a app and a website that's live currently. It's on the city's website under the Historic Preservation Board. It was a partnership with the state of Florida, the Department of State, Historical Resources, and the Historic Preservation Board as well. So they're going to be launching, you'll see a large public campaign for it in the coming months, but we wanted to give you a heads up about it and give you a sneak peek at what the booklet has. There's lots of great information in there. Also, I emailed the commission about the upcoming growth management planning officials training, and so far Chairman Severs is the only member that will be attending. There's one more space open, and there's no fee for members of the P&Z to attend. So if you'd like to attend tomorrow in New Smyrna Beach, there's the event is open, and we have one seat available. I'm encouraging you all to attend. And I'll have the flyer here if you want to take it, if anyone's interested. And then last, I wanted to ask the commission for the June 16th meeting if there's any interest in starting the meeting at 5 p.m. and if so, whether you'd prefer that to be a workshop where no voting could occur, or it would be a special meeting so that voting could occur. I just wanted to give you that heads up and ask for that feedback.
And the reason of the special meeting classification is because the other, there was something advertised for 6 o'clock?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's advertised for 6 o'clock?
Comp plan.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a new legal ad going out about the comprehensive plan? Because there's already been a legal ad about the comprehensive plan. Yeah. My preference would be, yes, we meet at 5 o'clock, and the sooner the better, and that it be a special meeting as such. If it turns out there's a special advertising time, for example, at 6 o'clock, we will try to accommodate that to comply with the legal advertising requirements. Member Richardson, you had your light on.
You saw the problem.
Okay. Do I hear any objections to starting at 5 o'clock? I don't hear any objection. 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock it is. Okay. Any other item, sir, we need to address? Okay. City Attorney.
I just am looking at the LID ordinance. That's the one that was advertised for 6 o'clock. It's Wednesday, June 9th at TEC and Wednesday, June 16th at the Planning and Zoning Commission for that particular item.
Okay. Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. I did receive the communication from Mr. Parrish suggesting that we look at the city council meeting as far as the appointment, which again, we're happy to have Mr. Ayton on board. In addition, suggesting we look at the conversation concerning the comprehensive plan, and finally the conversation about the LID ordinance. Honestly, I'm a little shocked and surprised how the commission got blamed for everything. Number one, with regard to the LID ordinance, council in particular thought we were delaying the process. And as you recall, you recommended that we table the ordinance. No one from staff was up front with the city council to tell them that, well, that was our recommendation, that it be tabled, that the Planning and Zoning Commission not take it up. And we got, frankly, dumped on because we were delaying the process. And if you don't believe what I'm saying, just look at the videotape that Mr. Perry suggested we look at. And that's the reason why the ultimate motion was, well, you have to give us an answer by a certain date because you're delaying the process. And I don't like that at all, because if a member of staff is sitting there and council is saying something about us, which is not true, I would do the same thing for you. I would speak up and defend you if it wasn't correct. And that was not correct at all. And with regard to the comprehensive plan, on September 2nd, 2020, we made a motion, Member Murray, motion to recommend moving forward transmitting the existing documents as the Planning and Zoning Commission has it and include the comments that were discussed at the September 2nd, 2020 Planning and Zoning meeting that are to be incorporated to the City Council for the next step in the process, seconded by Member Grant. That was unanimously approved by all members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we never heard anything since September 2nd, 2020 about the comprehensive plan until our last meeting. And to blame the Planning and Zoning Commission for this delay is not right. It is not right. I understand they didn't like the particular motion, and I didn't particularly like further delay because of the LID ordinance and the tree ordinance. And we were ready to act upon, and did act upon it in September 2nd, 2020. And for them to blame us for the time delay is not right. And I would expect somebody to speak up and give the true facts, particularly whenever they know the true facts. And in that regard, what I would like to do to comply with City Council's request, and I have no problem doing it, is make a motion for Rule 13 or reconsideration at our last meeting, which was a motion to table the item. That way we get it back on the agenda pursuant to the original advertising. And I don't know whether the city is re-advertising this or not, but they don't need to as far as the Planning and Zoning Commission. So at this stage, I'd like to pass the gavel and make a motion to reconsider our motion to table that item as such. And you can see if there's a second to the motion.
Well, point of clarification, which one are you talking about?
Microphone, please, sir.
Oh, it got the microphone on.
I'm talking about the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Because I'll second the motion because we thought in September that we had passed it to send it on to the state. And I felt like in the last meeting, you'd gotten the state comments and it looked the same as before. So I second the motion.
Question. Is your motion to send back what we recommended in September?
If the motion is passed, then the issue comes back before the Planning and Zoning Commission, which was a motion to table. My recommendation would be we deny that. Then the issue about the comprehensive plan is on the floor. If you want to go ahead and discuss that tonight, fine. I'm ready to discuss it. If you want to schedule it for our next meeting so that notice can be given to everybody we're considering, that's fine as well. But I just want to make sure we act upon it. We give our recommendation. As Mr. Broom suggested, you need to hear from the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're ready to give our recommendation, and let's move forward.
Is the recommendation to submit what we voted on in September? That's what I'm asking. And to me, if we've already voted on it, why don't we just submit what we did?
Well, when we get to that point, my recommendation would be that we have a similar motion, that we forward our recommendation for transmittal to the City Council with the items that were discussed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. That way our comments are forwarded on to the City Council. They can then decide whether they want to accept any of those or not accept them. We're a recommending body. We're making that recommendation.
If I may, with an explanation, we'd already done this. We did it in September.
Okay.
Well, my recollection of the last meeting is we did not vote on any recommendations or changes to the comprehensive plan at all as a body. Yes, individuals had some comments, but that's as far as it went. We never made a motion. I reckon we just tabled it. And that's my recollection. So if we bring it back up, then the only thing I can really support would be to recommend to transmit to the state as written by staff.
I certainly understand, Mr. Rice, your position, and that may be how you vote, which is fine. Yeah, you certainly can vote that way, but likewise, if other members of the commission feel as though recommend transmittal of what has been given to us, plus the additional comments made by individual members, somebody can include in that motion. If it's by majority vote, it's by majority vote.
Well, I did talk to Peggy today about it and asked her if indeed, if the comprehensive plan goes to the state, when it comes back, can we make recommendations or changes to the comprehensive plan before adoption? And the answer was yes. And that was the whole reason, quite frankly, that I thought maybe we should table it, because there was some confusion, at least I was confused on whether we were afforded that luxury to do it later or do we had to do it now, okay, before it got transmitted. And so it's my understanding now that the clarity I got from staff was that we can do it after it gets transmitted, and comes back to the state. We can make some changes to it if we need to. And that's my understanding. I guess, Council, is that a correct statement?
That's my understanding, sir.
If you want, I think Member Richardson's got his light on. If you want to get him.
Woody, I'd agree, but we thought we did that in September.
I know I wasn't here in September, so I don't know what you guys did.
So I don't know where the communications broke down. We thought it had been transmitted, and now we're getting blamed for it? I agree. We'll just say, we'll tell council we did it, and where it got held up, I do not know. And quite frankly, these two staff members were not present at a council meeting. So I don't want you to take some of the brunt. It's the lack of communication, my lips are dry, between this body and the development director. And she read off to council some reasons why we tabled it. And quite frankly, now we're all confused because we'd already done what they blamed us for not doing.
So I've just done a quick cursory search, by no means thorough research done here, but I am looking for when the 2040 comp plan was presented to City Council after the September 2nd hearing.
It was in January.
It was in January.
So what's happened since January, I don't know.
Why are they doing it a second time? The same action.
Well, Attorney, I think I can answer that question because it had not been legally advertised for a transmittal hearing before us back in September. And so they were finally doing it the formal process, the legal process for transmittal.
That makes sense.
That's what happened. But again, back to my motion, I just want to bring this issue back on the floor so we can take action and satisfy council as to what their request is.
So is there a second?
I did second it.
Do you want to call for a vote?
Yes, let's call for a vote. I need to call for a vote.
Roll call vote, please.
Spidell,
Yes.
Secretary Richardson,
Yes.
Member Porter,
Yes.
Member Rice,
Yes.
Member Aton?
Yes.
Member Grant?
Yes.
Chairman Severs?
Yes. Now, the issue on the floor, and correct me, Attorney, if I'm wrong, is the motion to table. We're back. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And is there discussion on the motion to table? I would respectfully urge you, you vote no, because we don't want to table it. And that way it'll put the issue back on our agenda.
We can just withdraw the motion, right? Or you have to vote.
Or you can withdraw.
I mean, I don't need to make a motion. I did.
Let's just have a vote, and that way it's formally in the record. If we could have a roll call. Again, this is on motion to table the comprehensive plan discussion. Roll call vote, please.
This is a motion to table?
No, this is on the motion to table. My advice is vote against it because we want to further discuss the issue.
After the Rule 13 was approved, we have gone back to the prior motion, which was the motion to table the item that was at the last agenda. That's where we are.
Gotcha. Thank you. Member Grant?
No.
Member Porter?
No.
Member Aton?
No.
Secretary Richardson?
No.
Vice Chairman Spidell?
No.
Member Rice?
No.
Chairman Severs?
No.
Mr. Chairman, I have if you don't mind,
Yes, sir.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I could have swore that Mr. Parrish told us last time, because the question was asked, if the comp plan was transmitted to the state and it came back without comments, would it come to us? And I believe the answer was that he said was no, it wouldn't. And why would it? I believe, and now you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I could have swore I heard him say that in our last meeting.
I do not think so.
Well,
What was clarified?
Minutes right here, and it says, Member Rice would like to know, Member Rice asked Mr. Parrish if this goes to the state for transmittal, does it come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission for additional review? Mr. Parrish said yes.
Correct, correct.
I guess I was asleep.
In addition, the only concern is if we try to make changes that are so substantive in nature, it may have to go back against to the state. And that's the reason why I think it's important if we have substantive comments, we make those. So that's the reason why I've kind of stressed that.
Well, I apologize for being asleep at the wheel. Then. I would have swore he said no.
Does the commission want to take any further action on this item for tonight, or do you want to? We've told it's going to be on the 16th agenda. Does anyone have a problem with that? Otherwise, it's on the 16th agenda. All I know is I've tried to preserve our legal advertising that we originally made in connection with this item, so they don't have to run another legal ad, which costs a lot of money to run. So does anyone want to discuss the issue further tonight? Not hearing it, so it'll go on the 16th agenda. Yes, sir.
I thought the whole reason why we brought it back up so we could act on it tonight and move it forward.
The staff has suggested that we have it on our 16th agenda. I'm just following what staff has suggested.
Yeah, but it was going to be on the 6th, or when was it scheduled to be back with the table that we did? It was going to be on the 16th anyways? So
That's
we're
my
not
understanding, yeah.
really accomplishing anything
Right.
at
I
all.
think if anything, it was formalized through the parliamentary procedures that it would be on the next agenda.
Okay. Can we act on that, now that it's back open for discussion, okay, and it's not tabled any longer, we can act on the comprehensive plan transmittal tonight legally?
I think so. But it's not been advertised for the public to participate, so I would recommend that it be continued.
So why did we rule 13 it then, I guess?
Just to establish to council, to communicate to council.
Microphone, please.
this all has become a little rat's nest because of council's reaction and from what they commented publicly. This constant criticism of planning and zoning is exhausting. And it also hurts every single volunteer here who spends as much time as we do on this. And we're accused of nitpicking and research. To be accused of nitpicking and adequately researching these critical areas offends me.
Member Richardson, your next light is on.
Yeah. I kind of agree with Woody. We might as well do what we did in September. But if it's advertised, we'll do it again. But I think this just points out the communication problem. And until we meet with council and TEC, and quite frankly, I've asked for a meeting with Peggy 4 times since December, and I have not been able to get one. We've asked her to appear before the commission when discussing this several times. Zero response. And I think, in fact, Brad should have told us at our last meeting it had not been submitted to the state. We thought it had been submitted to the state and we were voting on it again in final form.
Mr. Rice? Or, excuse me, Member Grant.
No, Mr. Go ahead, Mr. Rice. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead. I just want to complain. Go ahead.
For now. Woody, you're not done. Member Grant, you're on.
No, I better shut up.
Okay. I've covered 2 of the 3 items I wanted to cover based upon looking at the tape that Mr. Parrish suggested we look at. The last one dealt with the appointment process, which obviously I have no issue whatsoever about that. My concern was what was said. One member of council said 3 times, either it's me, it's the chairman, or the commission are not providing fair treatment and giving individuals a fair shake when they appear before us. Based upon that, I sent an email to the individual, asked him when was a convenient time that I wanted to know what his concern is and wanted to address it. And anytime if individuals have a concern, I'd like to talk about it up front, man to man. I think that's the right thing to do. In addition, I don't think it's appropriate for anybody to criticize this commission that way. I think we bend over backwards to try to be fair. I understand individuals may disagree with our decision, our recommendation, and that's fine. And it's clear to me that council wants a diverse group on this commission, which is a very good thing because they have a lot of information, a lot of input, and diverse information. And that's what democracy is all about. That's a good thing, I feel. In addition, there was expression of concern about us dragging our feet, taking our time by another member on the council. I sent a similar email to that individual and received a phone call in return, and we had a very healthy conversation. I feel as though that's the way things should be handled. You know, I don't, all of us are here trying to do things right for the city as we see it. Other people may disagree with that, and I understand that. That's no problem whatsoever. But I think it's wrong for council member or members to chastise us publicly that way without the courtesy of calling us in advance so we can address the concern. I don't think that's the right thing to do. So that's my comment. Any other member? Mr. Rice, you're up next.
Well, I'm still a little confused on what we're doing with the comprehensive plan, because we brought it back up, okay, and we've done nothing with it. So
If
where's it go from here?
Would you prefer a formal motion to table to the 16th meeting? We can do that.
I think at this point that would be
Okay.
fitting.
Would someone like to make a motion, this item be tabled to the 16th meeting so that the public can be aware we're going to have another meeting about it?
I move we table the consideration of the 2040 comp plan to June the 16th. Is that right?
Correct. Member Porter.
So I'm confused on the motion. I thought at the 16th meeting, we were just going to forward what we've done in September. I mean, we can either do it here. Why are we tabling it? We can either do it here or do it on the 16th.
It for the 16th.
So we can do it on the 16th. What are we tabling?
Consideration and making our recommendation as far as transmittal of the comprehensive plan.
But our recommendation in September was to submit it.
We may change our recommendation. We can do whatever we wish on the 16th.
Is that what we want to do, though?
I don't know. We'll find out then. Member Grant.
Well, we're already, well, no, never mind.
Member Rice.
Well, it's I just want to make sure it's clear in my head. The reason why we have to react on the transmittal that I wasn't here in September, but transmittal that was voted on in September is because it wasn't legally advertised as a transmittal in September, but it has now been legally advertised for transmittal. That's the whole issue?
That's what I understand.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's why we have to redo it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And just to add that, we had seen the comprehensive plan so many times, we wanted to move it along in September. Okay. Do we have, I know we had a motion. Did we have a second? I don't think we ever had a second to. You seconded? Roll call. Table it to the 16th.
Secretary Richardson.
Yes.
Member Porter.
Yes.
Member Aton.
Yes.
Member Grant.
Yes.
Member Rice.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Spidell. Yes. Chairman Severs.
Yes. Okay. Any other members? Mr. Aton, do you have a report, sir?
No, I one comment. I do appreciate tabling it till the 16th because I haven't even seen it yet. So if I'm going to vote on it, it'd be really good to see.
Yes, sir. Mr. Richardson.
Yes, there was also another comment made at the council meeting about a couple of strong personalities. I plead guilty on that one. And that's just the way I am. But I think this commission has done our best in everything that we've done in the last 4 years that I've been on this commission. But what came before us in the last commission and the chairman 5 or 6 years ago was exactly the same thing we're facing now. Lack of communication. In fact, 3 years ago, one of the members of council said when we had brought up again that somebody attend the council meeting to explain what planning and zoning did. A member of council said, don't you bring them up in here.
Okay, Member Rice.
Well, I just want to say,
comment.
well,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. You know, let's face who we are. We're P&Z. We're an advisory board.
Yes, sir.
That's it. City council gets to make the final decision. And sometimes you agree with their recommendations or their vote, and sometimes you don't, but we're just advisory, okay? And so we make the best recommendations we can to the city council. And if there's members that have a hard time with that because they don't follow our direction, that's just life, and you should run for city council. That's the way I just look at it. And quite frankly, I'm speaking from experience because I served on CRB when I first got involved. I didn't like the decisions, so I decided the buck stopped up there, and I ran. Okay, I made the mistake of winning. Okay, but it was a very enlightening experience.
21 years old. I've learned something since then.
Member Spidell.
I just don't want to be maligned on a public from the dais as a volunteer who has done some research. I'm tired of the personal attacks. And I accept them as personal attacks. And I don't think that's the proper forum.
Member Grant.
No, sir.
Member Porter.
Have a nice night.
Member, I have one thing for you, Member, is the materials I passed out at the tree committee meeting. I want to make sure he gets a copy, so you have that.
I was told yesterday on my staff, I'm going to get a copy of the submittal 15 days. Yours is 15. I remember this. Yours is 14. Yours is 15, and then I get a commission, a copy of the comp plan as well. So.
Thank you, sir. All right, meeting's adjourned.